Good day and special welcome to all attendees at the live presentation of findings for the 2018 Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions. Special welcome to members of the media for our data collection and data analysis stakeholders and other development professionals. With everyone, good day. The attendees are now participating either in the Zoom teleconference platform or using the PIOJ YouTube live stream where there is a live chat. You will notice that the agenda is on the screen and you can follow it. It will be placed up from time to time. Please note that all attendees will be automatically muted and your videos will be disabled if no face is shown. Questions and comments are welcome and will be accommodated after the main findings. You may write your question in the general chat in Zoom or in YouTube. Alternatively, if you are in the Zoom platform, you can write directly to the chat monitor with your participation request. This can either be a question that you've written out, or you may want to have to speak directly to one of our panelists. Look for the name Chat Monitor N. Allen to make your participation requests. Do continue to stand by. We will begin momentarily.
Thank you, Gwyneth. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, Ms. Carol Coy, Director General of the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Mrs. Suzette Johnson, Director, Policy Research Unit, Planning Institute of Jamaica, Mr. Easton Williams, Senior Director, Social Policy Planning and Research Division within the PIOJ, Mrs. Natalie Simpson, Director of Surveys at the Statistical Institute of Jamaica. Distinguished guests, members of the media, colleagues, good morning. I am Rochelle White and I will be your moderator for today's session. I'd like to formally welcome you to the presentation of the main findings for the 2018 edition of the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions. An invaluable source of socioeconomic data for the country, the JSLC is a household survey that monitors the living standards of the population and was first produced in the late 1980s to address the need for empirical evidence to guide planning and decision-making. Today's program will commence with remarks from Ms. Coy and Dr. Henry, followed by the presentation of the main findings by Mrs. Suzette Johnson. We're also joined by Ms. Natalie Simpson, who will be a part of the team fielding questions during the Q&A session. As I said before, I'll introduce Ms. Carol Coy and Dr. Henry, and then we will go straight into remarks from them. Ms. Carol Coy has been the Director General of the Statistical Institute of Jamaica since April 1, 2013, and is Jamaica's Chief Statistician with responsibility for the strategic development of Statin and Jamaica's National Statistics System. Ms. Coy is an experienced national accountant and for over 3 decades has been instrumental in the development and maintenance of the national accounts estimates for the Jamaican economy. She has lent her expertise both regionally and internationally. She is currently a member of the United Nations Statistics Division's Advisory Expert Group on National Accounts and the Caribbean Community's CARICOM Advisory Group on Statistics. Dr. Wayne Henry assumed the role of Director General for the Planning Institute of Jamaica on July 1, 2016. And in this capacity is the Chief Policy Advisor to the Government of Jamaica on economic, social, environmental, and external corporation management matters. He has extensive experience in the public and private sector, previously serving in capacities such as the Vice President for Government Affairs of the Scotiabank Group, Chief Technical Advisor to the Minister of Finance, as well as Special Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture. He is currently the Chairman of the Jamaica Social Investment Fund and the National Social Protection Committee, and is a member of several boards, including the Bank of Jamaica, the National Disaster Risk Management Council, and the National Foreign Trade Council. He's a Justice of the Peace and a lay pastor in the Methodist Church in Jamaica. We will now hear from both Ms. Coy and Dr. Henry as they bring remarks on behalf of the Statistical Institute of Jamaica and the Planning Institute of Jamaica, respectively.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is with great pleasure that I bring greetings on behalf of the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin, at this launch of the 2018 Survey of Living Conditions report. The Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions, known as the JSLC, has been a part of the regular work program of Statin since the first survey was fielded in 1988. The JSLC is a partnership between Statin and the Planning Institute of Jamaica, with Statin having responsibility for the survey's design and execution. The primary purpose of the JSLC is to provide the government with information for socio-economic policy development, evaluation, and planning. The survey provides a comprehensive range of social indicators that encompass demographic characteristics, household consumption, health, education, social protection, and housing. Every 5 years, a large sample JSLC is conducted to allow for parish estimates. The 2018 survey was such a large sample. One advantage of surveys such as this is the flexibility in accommodating modules geared at special studies. An additional module on time use was fielded in the 2018 survey. The purpose of the time use module was to collect information on how members of households spend their time on various activities during the day. Conducting surveys such as the JSLC is in keeping with Statin's mission, which is to contribute to national development through the provision of quality statistics to enable effective planning and decision-making. In undertaking surveys such as this, Statin follows a set of core principles. One such is the adherence to ethical and professional standards to ensure the transparency and methodological soundness guide the policies and practices of producing and disseminating official statistics. In keeping with this principle, the products and services produced by Statin undergo periodic assessment to ensure methodological soundness and compliance with international standards. The JSLC underwent such an assessment, and the 2018 survey reflects improvements in the sampling design and data collection. These changes were assessed and endorsed by the World Bank. The JSLC provides statistical information on a significant number of sustainable development goals. In addition, the time use module will provide data to monitor indicator 5.4.1, which is the proportion of time spent on unpaid domestic work and care work. We hope that our stakeholders, such as the public sector, researchers, and students, will find this publication useful. In conclusion, I take the opportunity to thank all individuals, agencies, groups, and organizations who contributed in one way or the other to the conduct of this survey. Appreciation is expressed to the Statin interviewers and staff for their dedication and hard work in conducting the survey. I would also like to say a special thank you to the householders who gave up their time to speak to our interviewers. We appreciate the important role you played in making this survey a reality. Thank you.
We come together today to officially release the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions 2018 report, which marks the 29th in the series. The JSLC serves as a tool for human resource development, poverty reduction, and the strengthening of the policy development, monitoring, and evaluation capacity of the government. The first round of the JSLC was fielded in 1988, and since then, there have been continuous revisions in the survey to ensure relevance and applicability. The data continues to be used to inform the development of policies and programs and to systematically track implementation progress. It is also used by international partners and tertiary students in the pursuit of research projects. The JSLC is key to informing outcomes from 2 of the 4 goals of Vision 2030 Jamaica National Development Plan. These 2 goals are Goal 1, Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential, and Goal 4, Jamaica has a healthy natural environment. Goal 1 utilizes the data to set baselines and targets for a healthy and stable population, world-class education and training, and effective social protection. And Goal 4 utilizes the housing data collected toward Outcome 15, sustainable urban and rural development. Moreover, among the many policies and programs that are informed by the JSLC are the National Policy on Poverty and National Poverty Reduction Program, the Program of Advancement through Health and Education PATH, the Draft National Housing Plan, the Draft National Spatial Plan, and the new Social Housing Program. While the COVID-19 pandemic may have slowed the progress made in several social and economic areas, the 2018 data serves as evidence of where we are coming from and where we still need to go as a country. Therefore, we encourage you as policymakers, researchers, development practitioners, and Jamaican citizens to use the data provided to facilitate robust discussion and renewed ideas to help lead Jamaica on a sustainable and resilient path to development and fulfill the vision of making Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.
Thank you to both Dr. Henry and Ms. Coy for providing those remarks. We will now have the presentation of the main findings by Mrs. Suzette Johnson. The current Director of Policy Research, Mrs. Johnson has been with the PIOJ for over 12 years and is responsible for producing socioeconomic research in areas critical to Jamaica's development to inform and guide policy, including the production of the JSLC. She is also an experienced program manager who has served the PIOJ as project coordinator with the Community Renewal Program. As you listen to her presentation, please use the chat feature to pose questions or comments on the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we share the main findings of the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions conducted in 2018. The JSLC has been providing rich data annually since 1988, and it continues to be an invaluable resource for policy guidance and research. The survey is the result of collaboration between the Statistical Institute of Jamaica Statin, which fields the survey, and the Planning Institute of Jamaica that analyzes and publishes the results. The PIOJ is tasked with ensuring that the findings produced are accurate and remain relevant for policy and program design. Given these considerations, there is a process of review that is detailed and extensive, and it involves internal and external peer review. Statistical techniques and survey methodologies change and improve over time. Statin continually reviews its methodologies and framework to ensure that the best possible quality data are produced. And so, for the 2018 survey, changes were introduced to the sampling design and the weighting methodology. When significant changes are introduced, there is a process of internal and independent external validation that is pursued. With these changes, we do not recommend direct comparison with previous years until they have been revised. The details of the changes are explained in the technical appendices of the publication. To date, we have revised the 2017 data, which are included in the report. Subsequent reports will carry trend analyses as the prior years are revised. The survey was fielded during the months of May to December, with over 13,000 individuals from 4,547 households. We would like to say thanks to everyone who took the time to provide this most valuable information. The 2018 report carries 8 modules, which includes a special module on time use. I will now share with you the main findings from each module, and where appropriate, comparisons will be made with 2017. National demographic statistics show that Jamaica is moving closer to the advanced stage of the demographic transition, where there is a decline in the child population, that is, persons 0 to 14 years of age. The majority of the population is of working age, 15 to 64 years, and there is an increase in the dependent elderly population, persons 65 years and older. In 2018, a look at the distribution of the population by age showed that children accounted for 21.5% and the elderly a little under 10%. With a working age population of near 70%, Jamaica has a window of opportunity to improve productivity of this population for improved growth. The national household size continues to decline. The average size was 2.9 in 2018. The average size of male-headed households was 2.6, compared with 3.3 for female-headed households. Households headed by females traditionally comprise a larger number of children and other female members than those headed by males. Consistent with smaller household sizes, we are seeing an increase in the proportion of households with only one member. Single-member households accounted for the largest share of all household sizes. This was seen in all 3 regions. By socioeconomic status, single-member households were more common among wealthier households. Among households in Quintile 5, 44.2% had only one member, compared with 15.6% of households in Quintile 1. Moving on to health. Non-communicable diseases are a major health concern, as they are the leading cause of morbidity, disability, and death in Jamaica and globally. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that persons with underlying conditions are particularly vulnerable. In 2018, 23.9% of individuals reported that they had at least one of the 7 conditions that we investigate. There are distinct differences by sex and age. The reported prevalence of NCDs among females was 29.1%. This exceeded males by approximately 10 percentage points. By age, older persons have a significantly higher prevalence of NCDs. The most common NCDs are hypertension and diabetes. Among elderly females, 59.7% reported having hypertension and 29.4% diabetes. These proportions double that of males in the same age group. These estimates demonstrate the level of vulnerability faced by elderly persons with chronic illnesses. In exploring the use of healthcare facilities, we found that of the persons who were ill or injured during the 4 weeks preceding the interview, approximately 65.6% sought care. Half of those who sought care went exclusively to a public healthcare facility, 6.1 percentage points more than those who went only to private. On average, waiting time in a public hospital between registration and being seen by a healthcare professional was 2.9 hours. And in public health centers or maternity centers, The average waiting time reported was 4.5 hours. While the average waiting time in the public and private hospitals were similar, the waiting time in public health centers more than doubled the time reported in private clinics. Every other year, the survey captures information on the health status of children who are 5 years and younger. Households reported that almost all births were registered. 89.2% of children had received vaccines for preventable childhood diseases. In assessing their nutritional status, we found that 3.4% of children under 5 were undernourished and 5.9% were overweight. Under the topic of education, we see gross enrollment, which is it has consistently been high at over 95% from the early childhood level up to grade 11. For attendance during the 20-day reference period, 74.2% of children were sent to school every day. For those who missed some days from school, the main reasons for absence were illness, money problems, and rain. Among students in the poorest quintile, 38.5% reported illness as the main cause for absence, 32.2% money problems, and 11.9% said rain. Among those in the wealthiest quintile, more than half indicated that illness was the main reason. 11.6% indicated rain and 5.7% money problems. Overall enrollment for persons 17 to 18 years was 67.8% compared with 66.7% in 2017. We observe that enrollment in 2018 for students in quintiles 1 to 4 were within 10 percentage points of each other. The disparity was greatest at quintile 5, registering 22.5 percentage points above quintile 4. For those 19 to 24 years, overall enrollment was 15.9% relative to 16.8% in 2017. Enrollment among the poorest was 5.4%, with quintile 5 times higher. We also examined the educational attainment of persons 14 years and older who were not enrolled in an educational institution. These persons supply our labor force. 25.9% reported having some form of academic qualification that would allow them to enter and advance in the workforce. 21.6% had at some point enrolled in a skills training program, while 60% reporting having no certification. For those in the prime working age, that is persons 25 to 54 years, the proportions were slightly better. There is a module dedicated to early childhood development. In addition to the 8 disaggregated data provided throughout the report, this chapter explores key factors within the living environment and the interactions that influence the development of children 0 to 8 years old. Some of that information relates to stimulating activities and stimulating materials within the home. Respondents indicated that during the month preceding the survey, an adult in the household engaged in stimulating activities with 70% of children. The most popular activities were playing games and reading and showing books. Approximately 7 in every 10 children were provided with books other than school books. Other common materials were toys that teach numbers and toys that teach colors, shapes, and sizes. In relation to disciplinary approaches, the method most commonly practiced was corporal punishment. The most common corporal punishment method was slapping, administered with 67.3% of children. This was also the most common method used overall. Among non-corporal punishment methods, the most common approach was talking with the child about why their action was wrong. We also explored the types of psychologically aggressive methods, and the most common was quarreling and shouting. Let us move on to housing. The housing module of the JSLC includes data on the housing quality. So we look at the quality of the housing stock. This is shown in summary form through the Housing Quality Index that shows the proportion of households living in conditions that conform to established standards. Below are the 6 component indicators. In 2018, the HQI for Jamaica was 75.3%. Despite an HQI of 70.7% in rural areas, this region continued to lag behind the other regions in some of the indicators. We know that we are vulnerable to natural disasters. We observe that 72.6% of households live in dwellings that are to some degree structurally resilient. However, 6.2% have home insurance, which gives an indication of the proportion of households that have the capacity to recover after a disaster. In relation to drought, 60% of households reported that during the 30 days preceding the interview, they had at least one water lockoff. The average number of lockoffs was 7.6, irrespective of duration. 21.6% of households also use unimproved sources of drinking water as their main source. These include rainwater, rivers, lakes, and springs. We recognize the importance of having access to information and communication technologies, and this is particularly relevant in the context of remote learning and working from home. In 2018, 38.4% of households reported having a working computer. Of those households, 70% had a working laptop, 59.9% a tablet, and 13.1% had a desktop. 64.9% of households had access to the internet, with 35.2% having both a working computer and access to the internet. Under the Social Protection module, we examined participation in major social protection programs. The Program of Advancement through Health and Education PATH is the main safety net income transfer program to families. Using the household as a proxy, 61.2% of those that applied had received a benefit. Consistent with the program objectives, the majority of beneficiaries is from the 2 poorest quintiles. For other social protection programs, registration remains low, despite opportunities to provide income support and a supplement to the cost of healthcare. Food security is an important aspect of social protection. We need to know if households have access to and can afford adequate, safe, and nutritious food. Relative to 2017, a larger proportion of households indicated that they generally have sufficient food. In 2018, this was 62.7%, an increase of 4.5 percentage points. A time use module was fielded in 2018 to provide an understanding of how individuals 18 years and older allocate time for their daily activities. This data gives insight into the overall welfare of the household. Data were collected on time spent in paid work and household production, unpaid work, and personal activities. The average time spent on activities as a share of the day shows that persons 18 years and older spent more than half of the day on self-care and paid work. That's 55.8% of the day. The other main activities done during the day include using communication devices, unpaid care and domestic work, and leisure and social activities. Moving on to the household consumption and poverty module. Positive performance in the Jamaican economy between 2017 and 2018 contributed to an improvement in the household's ability to spend and a resultant reduction in the prevalence of poverty. In 2018, the poverty prevalence was 12.6%, relative to 19.3% in 2017. This was a decline of 6.7 percentage points. By region, the rate of poverty was highest in rural areas at 15% and lowest in the GKMA at 9.2%. The reduction ranged from 8.5 percentage points in the GKMA to 5.2 percentage points in rural areas. The poverty prevalence in other urban centers was 12%, a decline of 7.8 percentage points. The JSLC continues to be used by policymakers, researchers, other professionals, and students locally and abroad. We invite you to obtain your copy of the report and the data. The report is available for sale on the PIOJ's website and at our in-house bookshop. Persons can also access information through the Wesley Hughes Documentation Center here at the PIOJ. The dataset is stored at the Derrick Gordon Data Bank at the University of the West Indies. Thank you.
Thank you to Suzette for presenting the main findings of the JSLC for 2018. We are now at the interactive section of the program, which will facilitate feedback and questions from the audience. And I'd like to start this section by just asking for your feedback on how you use the JSLC. So at this time, I'll ask the Zoom master to launch the poll. Please select how you use the household survey, how you use household survey data in your everyday activities in your work. I see the responses coming in. All the areas are being selected. And so far, those who do not use household data are in the minority. We'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll end. All right, I think all the responses are now in. And so we're seeing, I'm going to share the results so we can all see the areas that persons use the JSLC for. Influence policy direction, 56%. Guide program and project design, 54%. And you'll see that because it's multiple responses. Multiple responses were permitted. So it's not going to sum to 100. But thank you very much for indicating how you use the JSLC. So I'm going to ask the audience to permit me to ask the first question. And I will be posing this question to both Dr. Henry and Ms. Coy. For both of you, please articulate the main factors which resulted in the release of the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions for 2018 in April 2021. I will ask Ms. Coy to respond first, followed by Dr. Henry. Ms. Coy?
Okay. As was said before, there are two aspects to the survey, in the sense that Statin does the data collection. So I can only speak on the side of Statin where we had the data collection. And I think because it was a large survey, it would have taken a little longer. But as was said in the report, the data collection took place between June and I think December. So for us, that would have contributed on our side, where the longer period would have taken place. So that is what I can comment on.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coy. Dr. Henry?
All right, so thank you for the question, Rochelle. So as we know, or may not, the PIOJ releases the data on a phase basis. And so we prioritize the prevalence of poverty in terms of gathered from the data itself as we analyze the poverty rates and the prevalence of poverty and how that plays out through the country. And we released that, that was released in June of last year, June 2020. But because of the change in methodology, which is always good, as Statin Carol Coy has said, you know, they to keep on the cutting edge, and they revise the methodology to ensure best practice, etc. As that was done, we had a review, as you'd have heard, by an external agency, the World Bank, does to review and assess that methodological change to ensure, you know, the same integrity of the data in terms of explaining the results that we were seeing. And that was done, and we were satisfied. And then following that, we released the prevalence of poverty. So there's that delay there. But then after that, then we would have done the writing in terms of the technical writing of the report and the technical reviews of the chapters. And so those were completed in December of 2020. Though I think, just to underscore that Statin ourselves, PIOJ, we are committed to ensuring that speedy turnaround, shortening the timeline in terms of how the time to prepare and to release the data, because we know the importance of the timeliness. So it's something we continue to work at and continue to improve the use of technology and other things. There are many challenges, but it's something that we are committed to. So that's what I would say on the PIOJ end.
Thank you, DG, and thank you to Ms. Coy for just indicating to us some of the factors which would have contributed to the delay in releasing the 2018 GSLC. So the floor is now open for your questions. Ms. Nicole Allen will be assisting in just indicating who is first in line. I'm seeing some questions in the chat. A look at the demographic characteristics under mean household size. The stat seems to be the same at one decimal place. Are there any considerations to increasing the decimal places so that small changes can be identified and tracked? And this is from Frederick Gordon at the PIOJ. Dr. Simpson, would you be able to take that question? Or Ms. Coy? Or would that be on the PIOJ side? Colleagues? Okay, I think.
Hi, Rochelle, sorry, Ms. White, can you repeat the question for me, please?
Okay, so I look at the demographic characteristics on the mean household size. The statistics seem to be the same at one decimal place. Are there any considerations to increase the decimal places so that small changes can be identified and tracked? But I'm surmising that that may be something that we would be responding to on our side. Nicole? It seems we're having some challenges with unmuting. We'll take that question a little later.
Rochelle, here.
Yes, Mr. Williams, go ahead.
Yeah, that is purely a matter of choice. You know, although these are very small changes happening from year to year, especially in the demographics. So it's a matter of choice, really. We could, and I'm not sure what value would be, if we increase the decimal places.
Okay.
But it's optional.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Another question. Are we using the 2018 to make decisions in government now in 2021? Generally, let me just make a first attempt at that. The JSLC, after the process of completing the publication is complete, typically a cabinet submission is done outlining the main policy implications. And while the survey was done in 2018, there are still some implications from the JSLC which would still be relevant to 2021. I don't know if the PRU team would like to add anything to that, but it would still be relevant. There's another question. Can details be shared on gender and poverty? And the same for unpaid care work.
Okay, thank you for that question, Rochelle. We have disaggregated poverty by the head of the sex of the head of the household. And we find that poverty in households headed by females in 2018 was 14.4%, and for male-headed households, 11%. We can do the assessment based on the time use separately, but we have not prepared that estimate right now.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, I gather you have some questions?
Alfred, unmute me.
Yes, we're hearing you, Nicole.
Rochelle, we have a question from Andrew Ladley from the RGR Gleaner business.
Okay, Mr. Ladley, go ahead, please.
Has the COVID-19 pandemic widened the economic gap in Jamaica? If yes, what is the disparity between the wealthy and the poor?
DG?
So thank you very much. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, we're hearing
Good.
you.
Thank you very much, Andrews. Thank you for answering. It's a good question. We are still analyzing, as you would imagine, the numbers as COVID is ongoing. It's still a process. We've done an early assessment in some of the loss estimates of the pandemic. But so it's a little early, but we can anticipate for the most part that you may expect some widening of inequality, because we've seen that the pandemic has seemingly been exacerbating or worsening inequality globally in terms of persons' capacity to respond appropriately in terms of and adequately in the pandemic. You think of even the changes you've seen in the education sector and the delivery of education services, that not everyone has the same capacity for connectivity to access devices in terms of persons who may run enterprises, particularly some of our micro and small enterprises that may be more transaction based, when we have protocols that limit the movement of persons. It's very challenging, and not everyone would have the same capacity to build reserves even as you go into aspects of lockdown. And so that's why the care program, the various to serve the different programs for social protection and to enhance the social safety net have been very, very important. So I would say, Andrew, it is early still. Persons say, part of the challenge of the pandemic, it's that it continues to be prolonged. It's ongoing. And while the transfers and the efforts by governments to cushion, and to provide social transfers and to strengthen the social safety net responses are key, as the pandemic goes on, it can make the situation worse. So I would say a priori before the fact that we can anticipate it, but we would have more to say as we run the numbers. So obviously the efforts to to cushion the efforts to buffer the fallout, Jamaica had been, relatively better off than some other countries in terms of small island developing states, because we went in on a strong period of the sort of 8 to 10 years of structural reform, where we saw our debt levels reduce, so that while most countries have had, and Jamaica including, to increase debt, then we were coming from a reduced position in terms of debt to GDP ratio of just over 90%. So we had some reduced levels of debt because of some of the success of the program. So a lot can be said, and we'll continue to update, analyze, starting ourselves and the other economic managers, and to update the country.
Thank you, DG. Nicole?
Another one from Angela Adley. What percentage of Jamaicans rely on government benefits like PATH to survive every day?
I think we may have to provide the specifics for that at a later date. DG?
I agree. So we can provide that. We can pull those numbers and provide that. And ultimately the goal of social protection is to empower persons, that they'll graduate, that they won't be, in a sustained way, receiving these benefits, but they will be empowered in some way, whether through, income creation, employment, creating opportunities, education opportunities, to move them beyond. And so we can provide some of those numbers and track some of that progress in what's been happening. But one of the concerns we do have is that in context of our Vision 2030 National Development Plan target of reducing poverty, while we had made some significant stride prior to the pandemic, we would expect there may be some slippage in those indicators because of the nature of this pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, additional questions?
I have one from Frederick Gordon.
Oh, go ahead.
Single member households are increasing in the wealthier quintile. Are these occupied by males or females? And is there any plausible information as to why this is so?
You broke for a little, Nicole. Could you repeat the question?
Single member households are increasing in the wealthier quintile. Are these occupied by males or females? Any plausible information as to why this is so?
Suzette, would you want to take that question?
Thanks, Rochelle. So we see that we are finding that our single member households, it's occupied mainly by men. I don't know if Mr. Williams would like to chime in as the demographer as to why we're seeing this change.
Mr. Williams?
Well, I would say that situation has always been where the single male households, they are more wealthy, better placed. Maybe single men, professionals, and so on, living alone. And so that has always been the case. In recent times, we have seen some slight increases, yes. But again, probably I'm not sure there's any changes to the age of marriage among men, or we are seeing an increase in female-headed households as well. So I'm not quite sure what are the dynamics there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nicole?
Another question from Andrew Ladley. What is the current poverty rate like in Jamaica? And where does Jamaica rank in relation to other Caribbean countries?
Okay, so we have received the 2019 data set, which we are currently assessing. We do not yet have a poverty rate for 2019, and that would follow the usual process where the relevant assessment is done, and then it would be released to the cabinet and then to the public. So we're not yet there, but once we are, we will release it to the public. Any additional questions, Nicole?
Yes, I have a question from Douglas McIntosh. What factors contributed to the reduction in the poverty rates?
Suzette, you want to speak to those factors?
Yes, thank you very much for that question, Douglas. So we saw a lot of positive things happening in the economy between 2017 and 2018. There was GDP growth of 1.9%, and it was the 6th consecutive year of growth and the highest growth rate recorded since 2006. And we note that in 2018, it represents the highest level of production that we have on record. We also observed that in various industries, we had increases. So in mining and quarrying, there were increases of 33.8%. In agriculture, 4.1%, construction, 3.3%, wholesale, retail, trade, repair, and installation of machinery, WR trim, 1%. So we see that there were growth in a lot of industries. There was also a slowing in the rate of inflation. The inflation rate was 2.6%, and in 2017, it was 5.2%. We saw decreases in the unemployment. It was 9.1 in 2018, compared with 11.7 the previous year. There were also increases in remittance inflows to households. So quite a bit was happening that would enable households to be able to spend more.
DG, if I may just go back to that question about the poverty rate that Andrew Lately asked, the last question he posed, just to indicate from your perspective that there is a lag between the time when the survey is done and when the data is actually mined, and then the assessment. Would you like to just add anything there?
In terms of saying about for example,
the 2019, the fact that we are just now in 2021 receiving the data for 2019.
Yeah, so the processes we employ, as we say, we would do the assessments, the technical assessments to derive the actual poverty rate to ensure the data is and Statin does a very good job, the clean data, the integrity of the data. We assess and begin the calculations and the analysis to determine the poverty rates. And then looking at that across the country, right? So we do it by, in terms of looking at the sections, the areas, counties, parishes, and to get, as Suzette has outlined, those factors that we begin to cross-reference, that you don't see any what you call anomalies in the data. So you anticipate, because of the build up in job creation we've been seeing over the years recently, and as Suzette has pointed out, the record level of employment in one case and then record low unemployment in another, stable, low and stable inflation that the monetary authorities have been pursuing as a policy, and that's been very important also. And then the increase in remittance flows, and I think those factors combined, and remittances of course surprised a number of persons during the COVID time when the first case was discovered of positive case of COVID in Jamaica in last March, that since that time to now we've been seeing increases in remittance inflows, while because we've seen fallout in some of the countries where remittances would be sent from, the US, Canada, the UK, severe impacts there as many other countries, ourselves included, because of the pandemic. We still saw that typical counter-cyclical response of remittances, where more Jamaicans were sending more to their beneficiaries here back home. And we wondered, their ability to do so. We explain it in a few ways. One, that there was overtime and increases in overtime hours paid in the health sector because of the nature of the pandemic in some of these countries. And then a lot of our migrant workers, a lot of Jamaicans who migrate and work in these destination countries are employed in the health sector. So they were getting increased resources, albeit under increased pressure, but they had more to send back in that case. And then those others that were receiving transfers. So even when there may have been job losses or reduction in hours, but when the social transfers increased, they would have been sending monies back from that. And so we saw those increases coming in. So those factors combined, but then the time to process, as Rochelle has asked, there's a process time, and we want to continue to ensure, which we get high marks for, starting the country on a whole, is the integrity of the data, and that takes some effort. So we continue to safeguard that.
And if I may, Miss Coy and Dr. Simpson, just very quickly, because I've been advised by the timer that the amount of time for the Q&A is actually over. But just from the survey side, if you could just expound briefly on some of the factors which go into, fielding the survey and the length of time needed for that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. White, for that question. Or the opportunity to just explain a little bit about the process. So we start planning, and I'll give the example of the 2021 SLC right now. We started discussions about the 2021 SLC the end of last year. So during this period now, we're currently looking at the questionnaire, looking at the questions, deciding if there are changes that need to be made. Once that is complete, we do the training. The SLC is quite a large project, and the instrument is large, but also the number of persons engaged in data collection is quite large as well, because it's an all island, all Jamaica, survey. Once that is done, we execute the survey typically between the months of May, June, thereabout, of course, weather conditions permitting, and it will go up until about October, November, December. Of course, the 2018 was a large sample survey, so we visit way more households than we would in the typical years. Once that is done, we do our post-data collection quality checks and so on, and then the data cleaning is done. Once the data cleaning and the necessary metadata and documentations are prepared, then the data is transferred to the PIOJ for data analysis. As was outlined before, the 2018, because it was such a large year and because there were methodological changes, we had to do a lot of interrogation and analysis and examine the data to ensure, of course, integrity and so on and so forth. So that, added to the length of time for the execution of the 2018.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Simpson. And to wrap up, do we have any other questions? Nicole?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. We have a question from Glacier Reed. It was mentioned that there is 70% in the working population with the potential for improved growth. Can you share what would be some of the demographic dividends Jamaica can reap, and how could this potentially be affected due to the ongoing COVID pandemic?
Mr. Williams, Suzette, you want to take that one?
Well, from my side, 70% of the persons of the population are in the working ages. So therefore, we have a very large working age that we can mobilize in terms of training and, putting them to work and all of that. So, at this stage, we are reaping a demographic benefit. But that benefit will not last forever, It will come to an end. And so within this period of time, that we need to really mobilize that population for our development. I don't know if I need to go into more details on that, but all the ramifications to empower that segment of the population for productivity and growth is there for us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. Nicole?
If I can add, Rochelle,
Go ahead, sir.
So the second part saying, how would it be affected by COVID? Then, of course, it would be affected negatively, right? So part of the challenge is to ensure, as Easton said, ongoing productivity, that we continue to benefit from this demographic dividend of having more persons in the working age population present. How do we ensure that they continue to work? And that's part of the challenge. That has been part of the challenge for the COVID, that we can ensure safe ways to continue productivity and production. So that's the challenge, right? If you're doing an assessment, I'm sure a comprehensive assessment, when this is all over, as you're looking at the damage and loss of the impact of the pandemic, if you're doing it in a real comprehensive way, you would include that cohort. We've seen so far that unfortunately, a lot of the deaths have been older persons. And then if you begin to think now of institutional memory, if you think of areas of leadership, where some of the older persons in the societies across globally, you may have that concern of that fallout if there is not sufficient documentation, transfer, capture of the knowledge that they embody. All right, so quite a bit to be said there, but we don't want to take up the time. But thank you very much, Glacia, for the question.
Okay. Well, that concludes our question and answer session. Thank you so much for all the questions posed and to all the respondents for providing the responses and for the interactive session which we had. So I will now ask a question that will afford persons the opportunity to receive a gift. And here goes. Which Vision 2030 Jamaica goals utilize JSLC data for tracking development progress? Goal 1, Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential. Goal 2, the Jamaican society is secure, cohesive, and just. Goal 3, Jamaica's economy is prosperous. Or Goal 4, Jamaica has a healthy natural environment. Should I repeat it? Well, I'm seeing the responses coming.
Hi, Rochelle.
Yes, Nicole.
Douglas McIntosh got it correct. Goals 1 and 4.
Okay, and the goals 1 and 4, just to repeat, are Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential. And goal 4, Jamaica has a healthy natural environment. Just before I close the Q&A session, as we were speaking to the impact of COVID-19, we just wanted to indicate, and I would just give Dr. Simpson just a minute to indicate, to speak to this issue, that no JSLC survey was fielded in 2020 because of the impact of COVID-19. Dr. Simpson, you want to just give, or Ms. Coy, would you like to just give just a minute to indicate, why this was necessary? Dr. Simpson?
Okay, all right.
Ms. Coy?
Yes, I'll just say that in 2020, the Survey of Living Conditions is a long questionnaire, and the contact between household and interviewer is quite long. It's our longest survey. We don't have anything that long. And we felt it prudent, given the increase in COVID numbers, not to expose both our staff and the household to the risk. So at that point, we did not do a survey of living conditions. We will be doing one in 2021. But just also to note that our labor force survey, which is a shorter questionnaire, we have added some COVID questions. So we have some indicators on the impact of COVID on the labor force.
Thank you so much, Ms. Coy. Appreciated. So that concludes the question and answer session. I now invite Mr. Williams to do the vote of thanks. Mr. Williams is the Senior Director, Social Policy, Planning and Research Division of the PIOJ. He has worked at the Institute for over 30 years and has a wide experience in policy development and social research. Mr. Williams has headed several technical delegations to the United Nations and other international organizations in the areas of population, international migration, sustainable development, and related areas. Mr. Williams, the floor is yours.
Rochelle, I'm not seeing my mic, my video on.
Tech support, can you assist, please? You can go ahead though, Mr. Williams, we're hearing you.
Okay, good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to close by thanking all the persons who have made today's launch a success. It is my pleasure to express heartfelt gratitude to the team who worked tirelessly on the preparation and the completion of the JSLC 2018. To the OSOLs that took the time to answer the questionnaires, we thank you for the invaluable information you provided. Thanks to the different teams at the Planning Institute of Jamaica and the Statistical Institute of Jamaica for the different roles played in the success of the publication. To our technical steering committee members who provided expert advice and inputs into the entire process, you are acknowledged and appreciated. To our reviewers, we thank you. A big thank you to Mrs. Rochelle White for effortlessly and succinctly moderating today's proceedings. To the Directors General from the PIOJ and Statin, thank you for bringing remarks and for continued efforts to strengthen the partnership for the successful completion of the publication. Sincere thanks to Mrs. Suzette Johnson for delivering the findings of the 2018 edition of the JSLC. To our team, the Policy Research Unit, a big thank you for a job well done. To the members of the planning team, the members of the CAMC division at the PIOJ, a big thank you for the exquisite logistical work and support that went into the planning of this launch. I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement and their contributions in making this event a success. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your attendance, keen interest, and continued role in changing lives through data dissemination and application. Let us continue to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you. Rochelle?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Just to indicate that the winner of the question will be receiving a free copy of the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions, and you have the liberty of telling us whether you would like to receive that hard or soft. Gwyneth?
Thank you. We've come to the end of our event. The live stream will be a recording on YouTube momentarily. The PIOJ, you will visit the live stream is, in case you have not been there, it is the YouTube channel PIOJ Planning Institute of Jamaica. When you visit, do like, subscribe, share, and tap the notification bell to keep up with other PIOJ live events. Thank you for your interest, and we will now proceed to close the meeting.